Well, good morning to the people on the left coast or in the middle of North America, and good afternoon to people on the East Coast or Eastern Canada. It's course number 2, lecture number 2, sorry, in Reward Yourself. And we've got some wonderful, wonderful guests that will be joining us today for the second part of it. So the first part, you have to put up with me. I'll be speaking for about the next hour. And then after that, I think you've all seen in the emails that I've been sending out, we've got Ruben Ugarte and Mary Lou Aguilar from North Vancouver, who are national investors in both residential and commercial, and they're going to talk about one of the multi-res properties that they bought in Sudbury, which in about 5 years they paid millions of dollars on. So that's really cool. And then we're really fortunate to have probably the #1 financier in terms of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation funding. These are low-cost, high loan-to-value multifamily residential loans, up to 40-year amortization, 10-year terms. Yeah, Tim says, yay, Matt. Matt Slobodian is fantastic. He was based out of Winnipeg, but he's recently moved to Ottawa, the poor guy. I pity him. And the other day, I think it was on the Zoom call with Michael, who lives in Duncan, BC. And, you know, the birds were chirping and the grass was green and the trees were beautiful. And I have about 2.5 feet of snow in my front yard in Ottawa. I think, Tim, the Calgary weather's been pretty good too. You know, 11 or 12 degrees. So I really hate all of you guys who have good weather, but there you go. That's the way it is. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you, and I'll do that now. And here we are, slide 1. Jordan, can you just give me the thumbs up if you can see the screen okay? Thank you. So this is lecture number 2. In Reward Yourself, how to really find, buy, finance, renovate, refinance multi-res mixed-use buildings with out-of-sight cap rates. So that's a very positive statement, and we're going to hear, as I said, a little bit later in this class from Ruben Ugarte. He's going to do a case study for us, which was very successful, a 22-unit building that he and his spouse, Mary Lou, bought in Sudbury. But I wanted to show you, actually today I'm going to show you a couple of projects that did not meet expectations, because what I found is that it's important, obviously, to know what to do and how to do it well, and hopefully how to meet or exceed expectations. But I'm going to show you a couple of projects that didn't, and you can learn, I think, from that as well. So this is these are 32 units. You can see it on the lower right-hand side of my screen that were for sale in a small town in Ontario called Wendover. It was an investment property for sale for about $6.45 million, just over $200,000 per unit. And one of my clients was looking at this, and I tried to explain how he could perhaps make this a success. To me, a success is anything that has a cap rate of 6% or more. And I don't care, as I've said many times, whether you're in California or New Mexico or Arizona or British Columbia, I don't care. That's the minimum you should target. And if it's only going to be 1.9%, don't do it. If it's going to be 4%, probably don't do it. And this wasn't as bad as it looked initially. When we first did the analysis, we used some of the numbers that were provided to us by the realtor. And realtor numbers, you know, I am a realtor as well as a coach and a teacher, but sometimes realtors provide rubber numbers. I think everybody would agree to that. So we did some due diligence of our own, and it turned out that the going in cap rate was just a hair under the 6% that we were looking for. However, one of the problems that you have in smaller towns is that when you get an appraisal in a small town, often they'll use higher cap rates than they would in Toronto. Like in Toronto, they might have a 3.5% or 4% or even 4.5% cap rate that they apply to your investment income, which gives you these very high valuations. In LA, it might be even less than that. But in small towns in Ontario, some appraisers might use 6.5% or 7.5% or 8.5%. And I'm going to ask everybody a question, so listen up. If you buy something that has a 5.9% going in cap rate for about $6.5 million, and the appraiser comes along and uses a 7.5% cap rate, what happens to your appraised value? Is it higher than the purchase price or lower? If you think it's higher, write H. If you think it's lower, write L. Come on, guys, you know where the chat box is. Lower, 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 lower. Come on, everybody. Got to vote. Lower. I don't know. Did Jordan vote? Yeah. Bhupinder got it right. Yeah, I think everybody understands. So think about this. When you are, Denise Stewart, I knew you'd get that right. So if you think about it, I want you to think about it very carefully. If you're investing in a small town and you think, oh, Prof Bruce said 6% is okay, which I did say, if you get an appraiser who says, look, the cap rate I'm going to use on this for my appraisal is 6.5 or 7 or 7.5 or even 8.5, you will be underwater. So you might get say a 75% loan to value ratio, and we're going to hear from Matt Slobodian. He might get you 85% of appraised value with CMHC at very low rates. We're going to hear all about that later. Happy news, right? Happy news. Except if the appraised value, if you buy it for $6.5 million, the appraised value comes in at $5.5 million, you get 70, 80, 85% of $5.5 million, not $6.5 million, and you are really in trouble at that point. And the amount of equity you need, either from your piggy bank or from your investors or your partners or somewhere, rich Uncle Buck, goes way, way up. All right. So really 5.9% was not enough. All right. So he said, what do I do, Bruce? And I said, let's talk about animation. You guys probably, maybe you're not sick of hearing me talk about animation yet, but maybe at the end of next week's class, you will be. So I said, well, what about offering tenants tech and multimedia packages? So you get a little bit of money from providing with internet, Netflix, Prime Video, that sort of stuff. Good internet, good Wi-Fi, and some, exciting entertainment stuff. You can make some money on doing that. So a little bit of money. And then I said, what about if you converted some of those townhouses to medium-term rental or even short-term rental? Because even in small towns, I've been really surprised at how much demand there is, medium-term being sort of 3, 4, 5, or 6 month leases, and short-term rentals could be Airbnb or vacation rental by owner. I'm surprised at how much demand there is for that. And maybe I said, there's maybe enough room to put some, these little storage sheds that I like and rent those to your tenants. And I always like adding a playland. That is not an ROI thing in the sense that you don't make any money by having, fun stuff to do like a bocce court or outdoor ping pong. But tenants who play together, stay together. You've heard me say that. Couples who play together, stay together, and so on and so forth. But then there was another thing that I wanted to teach him. And this is where there's a bit of a coaching, I don't want to call it a failure, maybe I should, coaching failure or miscommunication in the average up thing, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So, I like to add fun stuff to do. Like I've said many times, even in industrial portfolios, I add something fun to do. The bocce court, the outdoor ping pong, cornhole. This is one of my daughters playing with her husband, the beanbag toss game, it's fun stuff. Love outdoor ping pong. Everybody can play ping pong. 7-year-olds can play ping pong and 70-year-olds can play ping pong. And, picnic tables, fun stuff. So looking at this particular location, I'm trying to understand the location a little better. Wendover, I don't really know the city all that well. I've been there many times, but don't really understand it. There is a marina there. There's a world-class fishing nearby in the Ottawa River. So there's ice fishing there too. There's a zoo not too far away, and there's some docks as well. So if you like kayaking, which is very nice on the Ottawa River when it isn't winter, which is pretty much all the time around here. And there's some shopping around, and some restaurants, and there's some golf, and there's some kind of an airport out there. So there's some stuff there that comes to mind. But this is the disconnect, because I tried to explain to my client that you're going to try and average up, because if it's a 5.9% cap rate, even with adding tech packages and maybe a few storage sheds in the back, it's probably not going to be much more than that, maybe 6.1 or 6.2. And I was really concerned the appraiser would come back and use an 8.5% cap rate, sink his ship. which in fact is what happened. So I said, you're going to have to average up. And I showed them this project. This was the very first project that we did with these mini workshops. You know, I come back to this workshop, live, work condition all the time, but there's a way to average up. So if you buy, you know, 20, 30 units, and you could find a building like this, not too far away, anywhere within 10 or 15 minutes of that apartment building, then you could start to do some really cool stuff with your leasing, where you could lease an apartment and a workshop together. And that workshop, if there's people out there who have side hustles or gigs, and there's millions of them today in North America, maybe even tens of millions of them, this might work. So I tried to explain to them, this is a project that we did on Akins Road. It's the very first place that we experimented with the workshops. And here, this was a substandard, only 10-foot 2 ceiling height warehouse that was available for purchase, and 3 of my clients did buy it. So in the 18,000 square foot substandard warehouse, they put in small workshops as small as, I think, 300 or 400 square feet. And some of the bigger ones were 1,600 or 2,000 square feet. And then they had an old farmhouse here. And I love the live work condition. That was rented to an environmental company for office, actually. Then they have 2 coverall buildings as well. Now, looking inside that building, you can see how small these workshops are. I mean, some of them are quite big. This one over here is probably 1,500 square feet, but this one over here is probably only 400 square feet. Very, very, very successful model. These are just pictures I took. And here's one of the partners in the project. That's Warren Creeks. And so this thing was advertised for sale. Some of you have heard this story before. It was advertised for sale by a big company at $990,000. My clients bought it for $250,000. Why did they get it so cheap? A, it's in the middle of nowhere, and B, it had substandard ceiling height of 10'2". All the industrial users want at least 18 feet, and probably these days closer to 30 feet, if not more. So they bought it and they animated it. So they had to do renovations. They had to build out the workshops, etc. So they ended up with about $850,000 invested in it, including the original purchase price, as you can see here on the screen. It had a really stupid cap rate on it. And I've said this many times, when you get to cap rates of 15 and 20 and 25 and 30%, you can actually stop calculating. It doesn't really matter at that point. It's just ridiculously good. But the good news about it is that the market value is now, it was 2 years ago around 2.1 million, then it went to 3 million. It's probably over $4 million today, just simply based on cash flow. Now, what does that have to do with the Wendover purchase? Well, what I said to my client is, you buy the Wendover at 5.9% and look and search for an Akins Road, this kind of a substandard warehouse that you can put mini workshops. And don't tell me that they're not available. You drive up and down any rural road in Ontario or Montana or in the Dakotas, anywhere, you're going to find these places. You're going to find mom and pop have a house in front, and they have a 10,000 square foot shed they've been assembling kitchens in, and they're going out of business, and their kids don't want it, their grandkids don't want it. There's tons of it. So if they had done that, you get an Akins Road with a ridiculous cap rate of 33% and a Wendover of 5.9. You are going to have something really interesting in terms of leasing that live work condition, and it can be within 15 minutes. People will drive 15 minutes to a workshop. They won't drive an hour, but they'll drive 15 minutes. And you'll average out a cap rate of 9.1%, right? So that's how you average up. And that's how you combine, I say this all the time, you combine this with that, where you combine things that don't seem to be related with each other, but actually are, and you can make real money doing this. And so it was a failure in the sense that I don't think he grasped the model, or he might have looked for, a day or two and couldn't find what he wanted. One of the keys to finding buildings is looking over and over and over again. My wife and I find great buildings to buy, but that's because she has done thousands and thousands of searches, pattern recognition. She can find stuff in Belleville. She can find stuff in Ottawa. I'm sure she can find stuff in LA. And she can do that because she has spent so many hours at it, and she's really good, and she knows what we're looking for. So don't give up the first search you do, and it doesn't pop up immediately. All right? Okay, enough of that. So what we're trying to do over and over and over again, even in the multi-res business, is create that live-work condition. If you can do that, I think you'll have great success. Good cap rates, tenants who will be happier, the workshop will be an asset, the apartment will cost them some money, but the combination means they'll stay longer. If you can reduce your churn rate, whether you own a duplex or you own a 22-unit building, and you don't have your tenants moving out every year. Say in the example of Wendover, if you had 32 units and everybody moved out every year, you'd have 32 new leases to do every year, 32 units to prep, maybe have to repaint, clean, maybe they're vacant for 2 weeks or months. So every year you'd be losing maybe a month of rent and all the make ready costs. So reducing churn is really important. And I believe workshops are a key to doing that. I've said this before, Robert Kiyosaki, he has said this for a long time, your house is not an asset, but if your house has some kind of income potential, like mine does with a little suite downstairs, we're going to build a coach house in the backyard, even your principal residence could become a Robert Kiyosaki asset. And certainly if you have a house or a duplex and you have a couple of workshops to rent to the people who are living there, that also transforms it from an investment that's doing okay to an investment that's doing probably much better. And I've said this before as well, if you have a workshop and you do a commercial lease for the workshop and you include the apartment, that apartment is not covered in Ontario by the Residential Tenancy Act. That is a huge profit driver. So there are some hidden benefits to have this live-work condition. All right, I wanted to show you, now I'll show you another model. This one is a success, all right? The other one was kind of just borderline, but this one is a blowout success. You see on the screen here on the left, top left, Carolyn Butts and her life partner and business partner, Hans Honegger. They moved from Toronto to a tiny town. I'm going to ask, has anybody heard of Tamworth? Just put in yes if you've heard of it. Oh, Mark's heard of it. Well, Mark, you know everything, so you're the encyclopedia. But if you've, other than Mark Turner, if anybody's heard of Tamworth, Ontario, just type in yes so I know that you've seen it. I think it has 7,000 people in it, so it's pretty tiny. Oh yeah, it's on the screen here. 75. Nobody else, no, nobody has heard of it other than Mark. So it has 7,700 people in it. And they moved there, and people said, "You're crazy! You're leaving the vibe of Toronto, which is a pretty cool place, I guess, for Tamworth, Ontario." But it's been a blowout success. Do you see this building on the screen here? That is a 20,000 square foot former garage, where they did car repairs. You can sort of see lubrication and service. Can you make it out, Jordan, on the screen? Service and that, so you can sort of see it. So it's an old garage. So it was 20,000 square feet. They bought it for $25,000. So that's about $1.25 a square foot. Like I said, you can't build anything for $1.25 a square foot. And what they did, their business model was this: they turned that garage, 20,000, into these really, really funky studios, and they did it themselves, right? You can see they're not afraid. I think Hans is an architect, but he's an architect who's not afraid of picking up a hammer. You can see that here, and a saw. And Carolyn is, boy, she's a goer, and not afraid of pitching in. And they divided up that 20,000 square foot space into really fantastic, funky studios, very, very, very inexpensive. Okay, and then they bought a bunch of other buildings in Tamworth, where they put in Airbnbs. Okay, and they did everything on a super, super, super low budget, because neither Hans nor Carolyn, had buckets of money. They did not. So I want to tell everybody who watches this live or participates live, and everybody who watches it later, that if you say you don't have any money, that is an excuse for doing nothing. There is money available. There's plenty of investors who have money and no time, who are interested in hearing from people like us, who know what we're doing. So money should not be a barrier. But if you are going to look for an apartment building, that where there are 14 other bidders on it, and some of them very, very wealthy, and they're bidding $1, $2, $3, $4 million over ask. You know, for an average entrepreneur, that's not really realistic, in my opinion. Okay, but to do something like this, where you're willing to do the work, right? Don't ever come to Prof Bruce and ask for coaching, but I don't want to do any work. You know, I want passive income. That is BS, excuse my language, but that is not real. Okay, there's work in everything we do, including marriage, right? So what they did was they created these short-term rentals and studio space, put them on Airbnb together, but they weren't really short-term rentals. They didn't want the 2 or 3 night stay. They wanted people who were, you know, writing a book. I like to write, so, you know, who wanted to stay for a month or 2 or 3 even. So it was more of a medium-term rental thing, less work involved in that, I can tell you. And it has been fantastic. So they've been buying up small apartments in small buildings in a small town, and they theme each apartment is themed. You know, theming is very important. You've got to give your buildings names, and whether it's Airbnb or just long-term rental, give your apartments names too. You know, if you like birds, you know, the Oriole, the Blue Jay, right? The Robin. So theme each apartment, theme your buildings, name them, renovate them using a lot of sweat equity if you have the time. And these people rented to artists and creatives who wanted to come and spend weeks. Then the other thing that happened was they started to find that a lot of the tech businesses in Toronto discovered Tamworth, tiny town, and they would send, you know, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 or 8, you know, techies, men and women, who would come there, and they would rent these Airbnbs for months sometimes, and they'd have a studio where they could go in and they could develop products. They were product managers, coders, whatever. And they wanted to get out of Toronto, really focus and put a push on getting a product out the door. There's a lot of distractions in Toronto, and there's a lot of distractions in the office. So it's been a blowout success. And I just wanted to put this up here for you, just to read some of the reviews they're getting on Airbnb. I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but this is another person from Toronto, and she came to, this is called Bon Echo Suites. That's the name they gave of their company and also of their facilities. I came to Bon Echo Suites to get away from Toronto for a week, desperately needing peace and solitude to work on a travel memoir book. Feeling the nagging distractions of everyday chores, work, and noisy urban life, I craved. Did I remember to record this? Yes, I did. Okay. I just was all of a sudden freaking out. Oh my God, I forgot to record it. Feeling the nagging distractions of everyday chores, work, and noisy urban life, I craved a quiet town like Tamworth to just focus on writing. The apartment at Bon Echo provided everything I needed, and my mind was finally able to relax and focus, making a huge difference in the creative process. Carolyn and Hans were also wonderful hosts for a lovely dinner, and enjoyed hearing about the progress I was making in my writing project. So they live in Tamworth, right? And they participate in the success of their business. It's not work free, and they work hard, but it's been a tremendous blowout success. So again, if you are thinking this course is going to help you find a 100-unit apartment building that you could buy, that cash flows $100 per month per unit, so you can make $10,000 a month with great tenants, no deferred maintenance, awesome property management because you don't want to do any work, and it's passive, totally passive income, and it has to be a no money down deal. This course is not for you. And that happens, that you've heard me say it before, that happens less often than winning the lottery. So if this is your business model, go buy a lotto ticket in the States or Canada, because it just doesn't happen. It happens once in a while, but very, very, very occasional. So this is just not realistic. All right, now I'm going to show you another a model. And this one is really, this is a success, fortunately. And some of you have seen it before, but I'll go over it quickly so you can refresh your memory. One of my clients in 2020, when the pandemic was really getting going, I think it might have been April or May of 2020, and he has 1,300 hotel rooms. I think it's in 6 hotels in 5 locations, 5 cities. And I said it was 90% vacant, but I think by April or May of that year, he was like 94%, 97% vacant, over 90% anyway vacant. What do you do? Imagine if you had a 1,300 unit apartment building that was all of a sudden 97% or 94% vacant. You're losing your shirt every month. And hotels are worse because you have a lot of staff. You've got to clean them and maintain them. And and whatever else. But you can see these are quite beautiful rooms. And I was coaching him and I said, why don't you pivot these to long-term rentals? He said, what? I said, you know, when I was a young fellow, you know, I remember my best friend, Costa Pilavaki. He was the son of the Greek ambassador who lived in the Chateau Laurier, downtown Ottawa. He and his parents lived there, and there were suites in the Chateau Laurier Hotel that rich people like this lived in year round, right? And it was lovely. I mean, I loved going there. There was a swimming pool, which I thought was pretty cool, indoor swimming pool. And there was beautiful restaurants and shops. You know, I was a young man, so pretty girls, that was definitely a plus. And Costa and his family lived in these beautiful suites. And I said, these are perfect micro suites. Why don't you put them up for a long-term lease? He said, do you think it'll work? I said, I don't know, but what you have now is not working. So he did pivot mostly to long-term rentals, but he did some medium-term rentals as well. And what he found was, it was very interesting. By converting 1,000 of his rooms to medium-term and long-term rentals, he developed committed monthly recurring revenues with much lower costs. Think about 1,000 rooms that you have to rent every day for 365 days a year. That means you have to do 365,000 leases. 365,000 transactions. That's a lot of transactions to keep your hotel full. But if you say did 2-year leases, then you would go from 365,000 annual transactions to 500 a year, right? You do 1,000 for 2 years, it averages 500 a year. 500 transactions, you need a lot less staff and a lot less cost to do 500 transactions a year instead of hundreds of thousands. And so you've reduced the problem from one to a many to one to a few, and you've developed committed monthly recurring revenues. You know what they're going to be. Plus, you don't go into somebody's micro suite and clean it every day and change the sheets and the laundry and all the rest of the stuff. So your costs drop a lot too. So back in 2020, I said to a number of my clients, there's a business model of this. You could probably pick up really cheap hotels and motels and do the same thing, repurpose them. This was done by a client of mine, and I have shown this before as well. This one just happened to come across my desk, and I sent it to one of my young clients who's very successful, former student. He's 40 now, so still young to me. But I mean, he was in my class when he was 21 or 22, but he's worth tens of millions of dollars now. And he was looking for a property in Florida because he hates the cold weather. He wants to spend at least 3 months in Florida every year. So I said, why don't you buy this thing? It's a 52-room motel. I prefer the motel because it has, you know, individual access to the rooms, so less COVID restrictions or concerns. It was for sale for $100,000 US for 52 rooms. It was an old guy and his wife who owned it, and they had, again, nobody there. And it was completely empty, and it was costing them $10,000 or $15,000 US a month just to pay the property taxes and maintain the staff and the building. So he bought it, he fixed it up, and he put some money into it and rented out the rooms on medium-term and long-term basis. And then this was where the manager, the owner, was living before. It was kind of dowdy. He really renovated that, so it's a place for him and his family to go. So think about that. He's got his cottage in Florida where he's got 52 people paying for it, right? So he's got his house here, really quite nice, and 52 units producing income. So what I'm trying to get across in my part of this lecture today, before we get to Ruben and to Matt, is that there are more models out there in multi-res than most people think. Again, most people think of multi-res is you find a 100-unit apartment building and you go into it and you bid against, you know, a dozen other people. That is not a model that is probably going to be successful for any of us. There are just some more pictures of the place he purchased. And, you know, I don't know if any of you have seen this. I think this was on Prime Video. Well, I really like the series, Billy Bob Thornton. It was called Goliath. And where did he live? He had a long-term lease in a motel or hotel. It was pretty dodgy, but that's you know, so this model is not new. Pilavachi lived in the Chateau Laurier with his family in the 1960s. And I'm sure people have been doing it in Manhattan since the 19th century, if not before. And if you look at any of those old Westerns, a lot of people were living in, you know, the saloon was here, the hotel was above, and people were living there on a long-term basis. So this is not a new model. And one of the things I wanted to also spend at least a minute or so on is that in real estate is kind of like politics. It's the art of the possible as opposed to the art of the perfect. And most people, when they talk about what they should do with their investment property or if they're developing a project, they talk about maximizing it. I don't. I talk about optimizing it. So if you bought that 52-room motel, you don't necessarily want to maximize the revenues. By maximize, maybe every one of those rooms should be on Airbnb. You know, if you have 52 rooms and you could keep them all full on Airbnb, you know, but you're really then in the hotel business. So maybe instead of maximizing revenues, we want to optimize. We want to reduce, we want some committed monthly recurring revenues, which Airbnb does not give you. So when I have a building like the building that Mark Turner and Jordan and others are helping me with in Belleville, when I have a building like that, I am trying to optimize it. So if I have 12 apartments, which we will have in that building, they're not all going to be on Airbnb, even though I need the money, right? Some of them will be long-term rentals. Some of them will be rented with commercial space, and some of them will be on Airbnb. So it's kind of an optimization where I'm trying to reduce the work, create long-term revenues, but also get as much revenue as I can within those constraints. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but if you kind of got the message optimization, put an O in the chat box. And if you didn't, don't put anything in there. Optimization, put an O in there. Come on, do some work, guys. Thank you. All right. Now, this is something that came up. I think Ruben and I and Mary Lou were talking about this over the last couple of weeks. I had to show you this. Everybody's saying, okay, Bhupinder, you got it. Karen Macker, thank you for that. Put an O in there. If you haven't done it already, get your fingers, wake up. All right. So again, there's Patrick, he woke up. Thanks, Patrick. Again, multi-res doesn't necessarily have to be that 5-story apartment building. And to me, multi-res could be buy a bed and breakfast, right? And a lot of my clients in Canada who are freezing their backsides off, especially in the East, they want to buy some property in the States. So that motel model I just showed you is a great model. You fix up part of it for your own real nice house, and then you've got 20 rooms or 30 rooms or 52 rooms paying the rent. And Ruben, 25 minutes from now I'm coming to you, and then after that, Matt, you're on. So how about buy a bed and breakfast? And so Mary Lou and Ruben and I were looking at this one. I had to show you this. This is kind of a multi-res kind of thing. This is in Kingman, Arizona. It's called the Blue Star Ranch, and it's offered for sale at $895,000 US dollars. So that's about 10 billion Canadian dollars. All right. It's a 13-acre ranch, has 5 homes on it. It's themed. You know, I like theming, Old West, and it has never been opened, which I kind of liked it. And then look at the bottom, that last point, 10 additional acres for an RV park. That's amazing, right? It's got a lot of potential. I really like it. So I just put some pictures in here. I mean, it's really hokey, but you'll see why I like it in a second. And so it's got all these different kind of buildings, and it's very funky. It's very different. So there's horseback riding, and there's all kinds of other things. And, I really like Arizona. It's got some kind of like animatronic stuff going on. I mean, I don't know. It's like a mini theme park, I suppose. And it's definitely themed. Look at this place. It just goes on and on and on, right? And it has what is called a caretaker home. How about that? For Canadians who are freezing their butt off, for $895,000, you can soup up this home. You can live there, at least in the wintertime. It's very pleasant in Arizona. It gets cold too, but not like, say, Ottawa. And then you have all the rest of the, the stuff that's going on there that's producing income for you. Look at the scenery there. It's beautiful. If you like the desert, it's beautiful. And here's just an aerial photograph of it, so you can see the this is, I guess this is the corral where you can do some horseback. And you look at all the guest cottages and everything else you've got there. And don't forget, you've got the additional 10 acres that you can do an RV park, a recreational vehicle park. That's a big thing in the States. So here the potential for it: 7 guest rooms, 9 guest room baths, owner's quarter, built in 1990. Property has not been open for business and has been a private family retreat, cash only. Because a lot of buyers will come along and say, can I buy it for $895,000? I'll put $2 down. In the United States, it would be $1 down and pay you the rest, $1 a year for 895,000 years. They're not interested in that. But look at the location. Here's Kingman, Arizona, 2 hours to Vegas. Oh, you can't see it here. 2 hours to Phoenix and 2 hours to the Grand Canyon. So if Ruben and Mary Lou or anybody else owned it, there'd be a lot of visitors. They want to go to Vegas for a day and gamble. They want to go down here to Phoenix and do whatever, see the Phoenix basketball team play, or tour the Grand Canyon. When you buy in the United States, it's very important to look at the demographics. You get that usually from Wikipedia. And this is simply something I pulled out of Wikipedia. There's about 20,000 people who live there, and you can see the racial makeup as well. It's important to look at that. And then you want to look at what's available if you're going to do something that's going to be on Airbnb. You want to look at what's available. And it is on Route 66, which is a famous route in the United States. And Kingman is the closest city to the Grand Canyon Skywalk. It's pretty scary to do this. I have done it where you walk out over this, this glass floor and you look down and it's a big drop. It's kind of like the Sky Dome, only kind of more natural. All right, now I'm going to switch gears. But there's lots of bed and breakfasts available, anywhere from 4 or 5 bedrooms to 20, and that's a multi-res in a way. This is a building that some of you have seen before, which is the most brilliant. Matt Whitworth says we'll take it. Well, you'll have to race Ruben and Mary Lou down there to Arizona to have a look at it. But anyway, so no, look, there's my wife and son. Hi, Matt. Hi, Don. Just walk behind Mark and Jordan. So this is the quadrant, which is developed by Patrick Rutherford and Patrick England. They call P squared. And again, some of you have seen it, so I won't take very long to go through it. It's the best floor plan for a multi-res. So if some of you are going to build one for yourself, and you're going to develop one, this is a fabulous plan. And what it is each of these apartments in the quadrant, I call it the quadrant, it's just Latin for 25. So it's 20, this happens to be 25 units. So I call it the quadrant because it's 25 units. And it has an external staircase. You can see it, 3 of them here. And you come in here and you can access each of the apartments through the external staircase. The reason that's important is these external staircases are not considered part of the building, even though they look like they're part of the building. They're protected from snow and rain by louvers, which are pretty effective. But you can walk up to each floor, and you can bring these buildings right to the sidewalk with this. All right, which is important, right into the setbacks, because these are permitted in most cities and towns in the setback. What's cool is you have now a floor with no internal corridors. So no internal corridors, no corridors to clean, heat, cool, paint, maintain, whatever, okay? It's a fabulous plan. And this, I think, was the very first one of its type that was built. So you can see it looks decent. And I think it's a great design. And if you can reduce the common area from typically 11 or 12% in an efficient building, it'd be a really efficient building might be 8%, but most of them are 12, maybe even 14%. Think about that. That's a huge saving. I'm not going to go through this at this stage because I'm going to run out of time. I want to make sure I get to Ruben in 19 minutes, and then after him, Matt Slobodian. So I'm not going to go through the details of this, but clients of mine are building these like they're popping up, like lilies or something like that, or whatever pops up in the spring. So I'm just going to go through these slides. I'm not going to talk to them because it's too long. I just want to show a couple of other things. So one of the changes that I think we're going to make to the quadrant design is where you have those external stairs, we're going to put in dumb waiters, all right? So that if you come back home with your groceries, you know, you can put them in the dumb waiter inside the stairwell and up it goes. And then you can access your groceries, or if you're leaving for a trip, you can put your, you know, your valise or whatever it is, your suitcase in it, and ship them down and up. And I think they're much cheaper than elevators. And I think it'll make it a little bit easier to move stuff in and out of your apartment. All right, I just have to go through this. Now I want to show yet another multi-res model that people won't think of as a multi-res model. All right, so this is another model that's multi-res in a way, okay? And this is one of my clients, Bob Wachna, who has already developed a very successful subdivision called Madawaska Shores. So you can see here, there's a beautiful river in Ontario called Madawaska River. I think it is the second best fishing river in Ontario, and I think it's the second cleanest river in Ontario, which is pretty good. And you can see he's got a lot of waterfront lots, and then he has a few non-waterfront lots, and they all sold at ridiculous prices. The waterfront lots, we thought, Bob and I thought when he started this process in 2015 and 16, we thought those lots would go for $250,000 each, which in Ottawa or Renfrew County is a pretty good number. They ended up, because of just incredible inflation going on in North American real estate, those waterfront lots ended up being sold for $400,000 each. So the profitability on the subdivision was off the charts. What does that have to do with multi-res? Well, be patient for a minute. This is Bob here on his property, and you've got these are pictures I took. It is an absolutely, you know, Ontario is a paradise for 6 months, and then it's a slog for the rest of the year. But it is a real paradise. And I wanted to play for you. This is one of the buyers. This is, and again, Jordan, if you don't mind, give me a thumbs up if you can hear it okay. I'm just going to turn it up a little bit because sometimes it's hard to hear. But this is one of the buyers of the lots, and I just want you to listen carefully to what he says.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with Chris at Madawaska Shores, and I'm just going to turn. We're going to see his better half up here, along with Bob Wachna, the developer. And I'm coming back to you, Chris. So, Chris, how big a lot did you buy here?
Slightly over 1¼ acres, 1.26.
All right, and I can't understand what you saw in the lot.
Beautiful water, lovely terrain, space for a walk-in, and lovely creek on one side.
So you've got a creek, and you've got you've obviously got a slope, but it's walkable, right, to the river here.
Yeah, there's a number of plateaus, and we're building pathways in.
Okay, and you told me you're going to build a bungalow. It's pretty big. How big is the bungalow?
About 1,700 square feet.
And it has a walkout condition, so you'll actually end up with, I guess, 3,400 square feet of developed space. Is that right?
Well, yes, but officially 1,700.
Okay, we won't tell the township anything else. And last question, you mentioned something about a garage with a bunkie. Tell me about that.
Besides the house, we intend to have a separate double garage with a bunkie on top. We have a number of adult children. We'll soon be bringing their kids when we get around to that.
So it's really, in a way, going to be a multi-generational home.
Absolutely.
And hopefully it'll be in the family for a long time.
I sure hope so.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay.
So the reason I showed you that is we should be designing, you know, for a different living condition where we're doing this live work thing, which I keep coming back to over and over again, but also this multi-generational thing. You know, I've talked about lock-off suites, even in multi-story buildings. Some of my clients are building it where you have an apartment and you have a lock-off suite, so an adult child could live there independently, but be connected to the family, or a daughter or son coming back with a kid for some reason. Again, they have some independence, or as you get older, maybe a caregiver lives in that lock-off suite and is connected. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do in design to improve our cap rates, which is great, but also to improve the living condition of the people who are there. So I wanted to show you this. Now, this is phase 2 of Bob's plan, and I want you to look on the screen here at the lots that are labeled C. And there's a C1 to C37. So there's 37 lots in really what will be phase 3. This is something called a land condominium, and you'll see the implications of that. And Bob is going to develop something we're thinking of calling a cottage park. You never use the term trailer park, and you guys can assume that those two words have been taken out of the vocabulary, right? Because, oh, I like the Bearland condo, Alberta equivalent. Thank you, Tim. The trailer park boys have forever tarnished the words trailer park. So it's a cottage park as opposed to a trailer park. And so we are going to use something called the Park Bridge model. We'll talk more about that in a second. It's a land condominium or Bearland condo out in Alberta. These means that the road will be a private roadway. It's less expensive to build. It takes up less land. The lots are much smaller. And it will either have, because this is rural property, this will either have individual private services, so individual septic and well, or it might have a communal system, small bore sewer system and communal well. We're not sure yet. Here's the thing though, it's leased land. In other words, Bob will develop, or at least I'm hoping Bob will develop the roads and the services and lease the land to people who will put modular homes on. So it'll be a cottage park, all right? And they will not be able to buy their own modular homes just anyway. They have to buy them through the developer. That's part of the Park Bridge model. But now I'm going to show you again the limits of coaching. Bob isn't sure he wants to do that. He might sell these condominium sites and not keep them in the family. And I'm going to show you that I think that is a mistake. But, you know, I'm a coach, I'm not his boss, and Bob has had a very successful first phase. But there's a big difference between selling a freehold waterfront lot for $400,000 and buying a very small, selling a very small lot that's part of a condominium. Not everybody's comfortable with condos, right? And a couple other things I wanted Bob to do, if I go back to I don't want to do that again. If I go back to his plan, I wanted him to keep at least one of these waterfront lots as a common area, so that when he got to phase 2 and phase 3 and maybe phase 4, there'd be one place where people could go to get access to this beautiful, beautiful water. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to sell every square foot or every linear foot of waterfront, you know, because he could get $400,000 a lot. But again, I'm not sure if I agree with that. But again, as a coach, you know, that's not up to me. So I think, you know, he's going to try and sell off these condo sites. I call them sites as opposed to lots because they're not freehold. And there's no committed monthly recurring revenues for Bob. Now, I did a bunch of spreadsheets. I'm going to stop this. And I'm going to just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to put this, oops, excuse me, I screwed up. I'm going to put these 4 spreadsheets into the chat box. And I want you all to, if you don't mind, to copy these links. And I'll probably send them to you by email. But anyway, just in case I forget, you won't. Put all of, oh, where's the chat box? There we are. Here they are. There's 4 spreadsheets I did, okay? And I'm just going to talk to them for a moment. 4 spreadsheets, so you can just copy them out of the chat box so you'll have them. And the first one I did was, what if Bob sells all of these sites? What's he going to get for them? He's certainly not going to get $400,000 a site. He thinks maybe he'll get $115,000 a site. So I use that number. And let's see if I can find them on my computer, so at least I could show you what I did. Here we are. Here we are. All right. So now I can share my screen with you and I'll show you what I did. because I got 8 minutes. So this is Madawaska Shores. It shows here as phase 2, but it actually might be phase 3. So if he sells those 37 sites for $115,000 per site, Jordan, again, can you see my screen, the spreadsheet? Okay, thank you. He'll have $4.2 million worth of sales. Great. He'll have some marketing costs, probably some buyers will show up with realtors. He'll have to pay realtors some money. He'll have some advertising he has to do. So maybe he nets out about $4 million. But look at his costs. Now, I wasn't sure what to do here. So I did 2 spreadsheets instead of 1. Should you do this? And I don't know, I'm going to ask again another poll question for you guys. When you're looking at your cost, now Bob's owned this land for like 5 or 6 years, and he got this part of the land for almost nothing, right? We did an unbelievable deal. That was, it was amazing. We found, unfortunately, an older fellow who was not well, and he just wanted to cash in his chips, which he did. He sold this particular part of the land for $100,000, which is not very much. And then he cashed in his chips literally. He passed away. He was a nice man. He gave me a ride on his property on a 4x4. And by that time, his legs didn't work, but he could still do everything he needed to do to take me around. That showed me the property. And he was a very nice man, and it passed away shortly after. So he just wanted to get rid of this property, and he sold it to Bob for $100,000. So the question is, when you're looking at your costs, should you put in here his original cost from 6 years ago or 7 years ago of $100,000, or his opportunity cost, because he could sell this land. You'll see it down below here. The land is about 22 acres. Today, he could probably sell that for about $700,000 or $800,000. Just sell it. It doesn't have to do a thing. So I want you to put in the chat box whether you think I should have used in this analysis opportunity cost, so you put in an O, or historical cost, an H. What would you put in? So Michael says O, or historical cost, H. If anybody, Mark says O, Pierce says O. I think that's right. Tim, that's typical Tim. It depends. Chiranjeev says O. Karen Acker says O. Peter, yeah, you agree. O. Yeah, Greg, thank you. Okay, so I get a sense that most of you agree. Thanks, Rose, Ruben, yeah. So anyway, the first one I did that way. So I put in his opportunity cost here. Look at the planning costs. I mean, to get a land company approved in Ontario, oh my God, it's going to take at least 2 years, and it wouldn't surprise me if it took a lot longer than that. He has to put roads and services in. He has to, I put in that he has to put in individual septics, and then I realized that most of the septics, if not all of them, will actually be put in by the buyers. So I put it in as a minus, and I put it in as a plus, so it cancels out. But he probably will have to do individual wells, and they're expensive today. They have to be engineered. So I put in a cost for individual wells. I got almost 2.8 million. I got over $2.8 million. I put in a big contingency because land development is very iffy. So his total costs are $3.1 million. He'll make $926,000. It'll probably take him 3 to 5 years to get that, if not longer. Now, I did an internal rate of calculation, internal rate of return calculation. I simplified it. So if all of his costs went out the door at time 0 and all of his money came in at the end of year 3, he would have a 9% internal rate of return. That is absolutely terrible. If my dad were alive today, he would say in the land development business, if you don't make 100%, you will go broke. Okay. So then I did a second one here where, which you will have now, hopefully it'll open, yeah, where I used the historical costs. So that was the only change I made between case 1 and case 2. And it did improve his internal rate of return to 19.4%. That would be acceptable on a duplex. It is not acceptable given the risks that you're taking in land development. Again, your goal in land development is 100%. So we can goose our returns by artificially depressing our costs by using the historical cost instead of the opportunity cost, but it still fails. All right, let's look at the third one. All right, the third one here. Now, I think, what did I do with the third one here? What was this one? Okay, now this is a big switch. Now I'm using the Park Ridge model. And the reason I call it the Park Ridge model is there's a company out there that's called Park Ridge. And this is kind of a multi-res. They develop cottage parks across Canada. I don't think they have it in the States. And they went from 3 locations to over 100 in 20 years. That's very good. It's a big company now. And the way they do it, here's their model in a minute. It's brilliant. They don't buy vacant land. Bob did that. He bought vacant land, just rural land. They don't do that. They buy an existing campground or an existing trailer park, which we don't call trailer parks anymore. And but it has room for expansion. And they buy it from older people who can't sell the damn things because their kids don't want it, their grandkids don't want it. They understand how hard mom and dad worked, or grandpa and grandpa worked, and a kid would rather be downtown Toronto, living the life, rather than some remote location running a trailer park. So Park Ridge buys them not very expensively. And then what they do, it has room for expansion. They put in the roads and the services and the sites, and then they lease those sites to people who buy the modular homes that go onto the site from Park Ridge. And Park Ridge tries to make about $50,000 on every sale of a modular home to a consumer, who then, they own that, and then they lease the land from Park Ridge, right, underneath. It costs about $40,000 or $50,000 to develop that site. And if you can make a profit of 50 grand on the sale of that modular home to your customer, your client, then basically you've produced your lot, your site, for free. It means every dollar of land lease that you get is pure cash flow. It's like an infinite return. And that's why Park Ridge was able to go from 3 sites to 100 in 20 years, right? It's a big company, multi-billion-dollar company now. All right. So what I did was I said, okay, what if Bob, instead of selling off these sites, so this is what I would like him to do, but again, I'm just the lowly coach, and he'll do what he wants to do. But I would not do all that work that we talked about to make $900,000. I would not do that with all the risks. I would absolutely not do that, but maybe that's the direction to go. But if he if he leased the land, maybe $700 or $800 a month, he's maybe provides a tech and multimedia package. He gets a gross income probably between $350,000 and $400,000 a year. His operating expenses, all that stuff we have to pay for, might take up 34% of that. So he might be left with $250,000 a year. Then we look at the costs, which are very similar to, in fact, identical to the other costs that I showed. But now we get to sell modular homes, and maybe we can make $50,000, because you don't let people buy their own, park their own crappy little RV on it or crappy trailer on there. They have to buy a nice modular home from Bob or through Bob. Bob's trying to make 50 grand on each one. Now he has some revenues from that, or profits from that, that offset his costs. So now his costs have dropped from over 3 million to about 1.3 million. His cap rate has jumped way up to 19.5%. That's not internal rate of return, that's cap rate. The fair market cap rate on this kind of stuff is around 6.5. So now he's got a project worth almost $4 million. And his internal rate of return is 44%. So it's getting better, still not the 100%. And then I did the final last one, which was exactly the same as case 3, except I used, I kind of cheated here. I used the historic cost, so I reduced that cost back to the $100,000. And I think I made a mistake here. Anyway, I think that should be a minus there. Oops, I guess it's not going to let me do that. Oh, yeah, it did. I got an internal rate of return with historical costs of around 92% internal rate of return. So getting closer to the 100%. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. So you ask yourself, why is that a multi-res? Well, whether you own 37 units that are stacked up, 4 stories high, or you own 37 units in a trailer park. And when clients of mine have bought these and done exactly this that I just showed you, the Park Ridge model, and have had really awesome success. Awesome success. Denise, there's one here in Ottawa. out by Dwyer Hill Road that a young client of mine, I don't think he's made 35 yet, bought, and he is doing exactly that model. It produces significant cash flow. It has, it doesn't have an infinite rate of return, but it has a pretty high rate of return. So I just want you guys to, as you're going through this course and as you're thinking about doing some multi-res investing, I want you to think about different models. And what you should try and do is you should try and find one that you really like, that you're passionate about, that you have skills that apply, and that's the one you want to do. All right, Ruben, are you around? Where's Ruben?
Yeah, yes, we're here.
So I'm 2 minutes late, so not too bad. I just want to introduce my friend.
How are you?
Ruben and Mary Lou, I see you. Are you back in North Vancouver?
Yes.
Are you jet lagged?
No, not really.
So yesterday, Ruben and Mary Lou were in this office with me, and today in Ottawa, and today they're 3 or 4, how many thousands of miles, kilometers, 5,000, 6,000 kilometers?
About 3,000.
3,000 miles, about 5,000 kilometers away. And really appreciate you being here. These are good friends of mine. And what we're going to hear today is how Ruben and Mary Lou transitioned a few years ago, now not that long ago, into real estate investing and have been fantastically successful in the residential space. And then they're going through another transition over the last few years into the commercial space. So hang on a second, Ruben, I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. I'll make sure I got your slides here. There we are. I'm going to share my screen. I'll move the slides, Ruben, and you do the presentation. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. And I'll just make them. So Ruben, can you see them okay?
Yes.
All right. So I'm really, really glad to welcome my dear friends from North Vancouver, Ruben and Mary Lou.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. So thank you, Bruce, for allowing us this to present this case study, a very successful case study. This is a building in, and I just want to make a small correction because I've seen on the emails and when Bruce was talking about, this is in Sarnia, not in Sudbury. So sorry, Bruce. So yeah, this is a building, a 22-unit townhouse, 3-level on each townhouse in 747 Indian Road in Sarnia. Sarnia is not a small town, but it's still small. It's about 100,000 people. And so we went to Sarnia in 2015. Right? If you can go next, Bruce. So we're going to talk about briefly here in this few minutes that Bruce gave us, what is the story, what is the property numbers, and then who we are. But and you have any questions about it. So go next. So basically in 2015, I mean, we are a part of a real estate group here in Vancouver. And a couple of people started talking about Sarnia and Windsor. And so at that point, we were looking to invest. We had only one house, a detached house in Port Coquitlam, about 20 minutes from here, which was rented. But we decided to, go more houses or multifamily. We didn't know that. But we took a trip in 2015 to Windsor and Sarnia. And we didn't like too much Windsor. Sorry if anyone is from Windsor in here, but when we got to Sarnia, and it actually changed the perspective, because Sarnia, in its way, is a beautiful town, and it has a different vibe, but is a beautiful town. And so we started looking at small houses in Sarnia. They were selling back then for about 80,000. And a friend had about 3 of those. Another one has about 5 of those. And I said, no, having all of these houses. So I met with a realtor, and then he said, well, yeah, I might have something for you. So he shows with a 6-plex, which is that one right there on the picture, for 350,000, and producing about close to 45,000 in income at that moment. So the cap rate at that moment was over 6%, like Bruce was saying. So we found an investor in this group in REAG And so she came along with us and we purchased that multifamily. And I can make a disclaimer in here because we didn't have any experience in multifamily. So we just jumped into it. We started reading books and all the training that we had on React. And so we started managing this thing. The first mistake that we did on this building is we changed property management. This building was managed by a company, a long-term company in Sarnia. And we, for some reason, we didn't like it without any data or any, facts. And we got a guy, an individual guy, that was recommended by someone, and he started managing this thing. Oh, it took only about 3 months to see the mistake. And so we had to go back to that property management company, and they accepted us, and they've been managing this building since then. But when we were in the process of closing this building, this is May 2016, the realtor calls me and he says, the guys that owns this building, these are retired guys that they are in Ireland, and they have a pub and they just want to have fun in Ireland. So they want to sell a 22 unit, which is across the road from this one. And that one was on sale. So I said, well, how much they want? I said, well, they want 1.4 million for 22 unit. So we start talking to a couple of mentors that we have in here, and they look at the building. So now we're going from 6 to 22 in less than 6 months. So the same investor, so she said, yeah, I have a lot of credit. Let's go for it. I mean, without too much analysis. I mean, she is not of the analysis type. I mean, she said, do you trust this building? And so actually the push for this building was Marilu, because she had a hunch, and it says, yes, we can do it. But that's when my stress level starts coming up. And I started going, to Sarnia almost every month. And so to make the story short, we closed on this building in September. So from March or May, from having 0 to September, now we have 28 units in 2 buildings, all managing, learning to do leases and inspections and financing. So we got the bank on board, actually. The first one was by CIBC, and then they came on board on this one with CIBC on the commercial division. So I met with all of those guys, and they gave us the mortgage, and so we got a rebate from the owners for $50,000, because they said, well, we're gonna replace the entire roof for $50,000. So we ended up buying it at 1.35 million. So that is the number that we ended up on this one. And this one, actually, it was over 7% cap rate. So it was actually better in cap rate than the sixplex. It was producing at that moment about 19,000 income a month.
Wow.
So this is kind of the units, right? Now these are renovated units, because I'm going to explain how we increase the value. If you own multifamily, there are a couple of ways to increase the value without doing any additional construction, and basically is renovating when somebody vacates, and increase the rent by. We were able to increase the rent by 20%, because that's one of the things that we saw. We saw the rents were way under market, even at 2016, at that year. So we decided to increase the rent in every move, and that's how we did for 5 years. And also at the same time, we offer a washer and dryer, because all these units already have the hookup for the washer and dryer on the basement. So just think about this. We purchase a set of washer and dryer for, say, $1,000. We increase the rent by $50. So that gives you an increase of value in the building for about $20,000 at 6% cap rate. So one single set of washer and dryer increases the value of this building by because the bank will not look at the washer and dryer. The bank will look at the rent roll. And when they do the appraisals and the analysis. So all we were doing through 5 years is we were focused constantly on increasing the rent. The expenses will will stay about the same. That's one of the disadvantages on this building. It has only one electrical meter, so we never sub-meter. So we were paying the electricity. And the electricity on this building is about $35,000 a year, right? So these are some of the numbers. Let me show you, and this is the comparison. I'm gonna try to see if I can go kind of slow in here. The numbers, look at the numbers on the left side. So we ended up at 1.4 with the rebate. At that moment, the assessment was 1.575. So right there, we had a kind of small gain. So they gave us 1 million, exactly 1 million. So we obtained in capital, and we put our own funds as well, a little bit more than 400,000. It was about 478 at the end. So we did all of that. We did the appraisal, inspections, legal fees, and all of that. So we ended up that at that moment, after doing all of this, the calculation was about 6% cap rate, right? So we are kind of on the target that we were looking for. But look at the one key thing that you have to look at is that indicator that is called gross rent multiplier. The gross rent multiplier, if it's below 7, is a very good building. And basically, the gross rent multiplier is just the purchase price divided by the total rent roll in the year. Right? So the rent roll on this building was about 200-something thousand a year. Because, and what is important? What is important? Because the gross rent multiplier allows you to operate this building in a cash flow positive territory. If you buy a building with 10 or 11 or 12 GRM, you are in a very risky building, because anything happens to the building that, a big ticket item that you have to replace, then that cash flow is going to go out of the window. So this gave us a cushion to start operating this building in 2016. And the cash on cash return, for the investor was around 6%. That's what we were getting at that moment. But we knew that we had to put a good chunk of money into renovating the units. The units, some of the units were, we got some horror stories in this building, really. Just one, I think the worst one was that when we did the inspection, we got into unit number 4, I remember very well. And we found about 20 rats in cages on the living room. And every one of us, the inspector, the appraiser, everyone, we were together. And when we go in there, and everyone kind of froze. And I asked the question, I said, well, what do you do with this rat? Why do you have these rats in here? And she said, well, I rescued these rats from the street, and then I gave it to people as pets. I said, oh, so this is one of the first things that had to go out of this building kind of as soon as we take possession. So it was kind of a good scene, looking at the faces of everyone, right, looking at this. And then we go to the basement, and there are another 20 cages in the basement. So we got a good bunch of rats in that unit, plus the unit was completely destroyed. But so through the years, now remember, we were increasing the rent and every time a unit will move out, we will invest about $4,000 to $5,000 in the units. Nothing big. We will paint it. We will put a new floor if it was needed. So doing that over and over, we did, I don't remember how many turnovers now in 5 years. We managed to increase the rent to about $25,000 a month, which that increased the value of the building calculated on a cap rate in Sarnia went down to about 5.5. So the calculated value was about 2.2 last year. But then in March of last year, our investor comes into a call, and she said, hey, Ruben and Marilu, I think this is time to sell the building. So I said, well, we are just approaching 5 years. Oh, I forgot. So we refinanced. That's another plus, right? We refinanced because on year 3, we were able, I did that on purpose. I put the mortgage on a 3-year term, because that way you don't pay penalty when you're gonna refinance, because we knew that we will refinance in 3 years. We already had the numbers. So we went back to the bank And they said, well, we want to refinance this building, but now we're gonna do it with CMHC. So I did the entire application with CMHC. You would not believe the amount of numbers and tables that we had to put together. But we were approved on a mortgage about 3%. I think it was about 3.1%. But we were able to pull 1.5 million on the mortgage, on the new mortgage, and still the building was cash flowing because we already had increased the numbers, the rent. So we went back to the investor and we wrote a check for 420,000 at that moment to give all the money back to the investor. So 3 years into the project, there was zero money invested into the project. So now, talking about what Bruce was saying, now we had an infinite return because there is no money into the building. The building is operating, is cash flowing. The only thing that you have to be careful on refinance and do the numbers well, because the banks can give you more money than what you calculate, is that you don't want to go into cash flow, negative cash flow. I mean, it's very attractive to get money out of the project on refinance, but you don't want to penalize the project. So we kept the building cash flowing positive, not big time, but I mean, we were paying everything until the sale came in. So I talked to a realtor and they said, well, you know, like Bruce was saying, the prices went crazy in Sarnia. In Sarnia, I mean, it's those 80,000 houses, now they are selling for 250,000. So you will not see that in a small town like Sarnia. I mean, almost double. But now look at this building. We put it for sale. I mean, in a crazy number, actually, it was crazy number. We put it for sale at 4.5 million. I knew that the building was not valued at 4.5 million. But, you know, we said, well, we're going to use it as a strategy and see, you know, what happened. We had about 50 inquirers, you know, companies and everything, but nobody was willing to pay 4.5 million, which I kind of knew. I said, well, it's a little bit too much, but, you know, for Sarnia. But we ended up, you know, after negotiating with a big company that they own about 3,000 units to purchase on 3.6 million. So now look at the numbers. Remember, there is no invested money already at this point in the building. We had a mortgage of about 1.56 millions we had to pay a very, very big penalty, which I was a little bit sad about that. We paid 77,000 on that. Obviously, the selling cost, legal and realtor. So we ended up with a gross revenue of 1.8 million on this building with zero money invested already, right? Because the investor already had the money back. We're gonna pay, actually, we haven't paid it. We're gonna pay it in June. We're gonna pay 389,000 in capital gains. And so we ended up with a net revenue of 1.4 million. So in 5 years, and at that moment, the NOI was 105,000. So look at the cap rate that the company bought this building at. They bought it at less than 3%. The thing is that, I mean, we as an investor, we will not buy a building at that cap rate. Like, you know, if you're following Bruce, you know, Bruce, you were saying, hey, you know, anything less than 6%, right? So, but these big companies, they don't actually buy on only cap rate because they got so many units. So if you have 22 units to 3,000 units, I mean, it's barely nothing. I mean, for them, so they can offset that. But okay, so we ended up, you know, each partner, we were 50-50 on this building. So we ended up at about $700,000 for 5 years work. Heavy work, I can tell you, a lot of stress and a lot of work, but, you can see there it pays off. And the ROI that it was obtained yearly, this is a yearly ROI, is 33%. Now, this type of numbers we have only seen in the US. In Canada, in this type of buildings, it's very, very difficult. The only reason that this number was achieved is because of the craziness of the market. Because in reality, that's why they did that, the 3.6 million. Because at 2.2 million, the number is less than that. And I don't think we would have sold at 2.2 million, right?
So Ruben, can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, yes.
So on behalf of everybody here, I get asked all the time, should you have a 3-year term on your mortgage, a 5-year or a 10-year term? We're going to hear from Matt in a few minutes, Matt Slobodian in a few minutes about that. But notice the penalty, almost $78,000 penalty that Ruben and Mary Lou and their investor partner had to pay to get out of the mortgage. So if you're in this business of buying and selling, even though we're a buy and hold guys, all of us buy and hold, men and women, every once in a while, it does make sense to sell. So Ruben, if you were doing it over again, would you have had like a 1-year or 2-year terms instead of longer term mortgages?
Well, the reason when we did a 5-year term, the one on the purchase, we did it on purpose at 3 years, because at the beginning, the plan for this building was to hold it at least, I would say at least 7 to 10 years. And so we're still on that point at 2019 when we refinanced. And in order to get a very good mortgage rate, interest rate with CMHC, they don't give you a choice. You have to do a closed mortgage at 5-year term. So we accepted because the strategy at that point in 2019 was still 5 years. And I said, okay, well, so on 5 years, we're going to come and we'll do it again, because in these buildings, you can do the refinance over and over, right? Every 5 years. But with CMHC, they don't allow you anything less than 5 years, and to obtain that good rate, right? And not only that, forget that penalty. In order to get the insurance on CMHC, we paid $109,000.
Wow.
So the only way that you recover the insurance on CMHC is if you run the 5 years. We did only 2, so that's another loss, if you can call it, back in the mortgage. But
so I would say to everybody on the call, we are all buy and hold people, except sometimes we're not. And I have said it before. Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book, I think in 2012, Fast Money Beats Slow Money. And I had to read it 3 times to really make sure I got it. And what he was saying is that if you have a building like Ruben and Mary Lou's building, this one, that has kind of peaked in value, and it's at a really extraordinary high peak, and you have other investments that you think will produce more appreciation and more cash flow, then every once in a while, you sell that building so you can trade up. That's what Ruben and Mary Lou have done.
Well, one of the things now, these are the numbers of the building, and I think you're gonna give this presentation, but I just want to mention something. This company also owns a self-storage facility in Plimpton, Wyoming, just outside Sarnia. It's in Ontario. And so what we were able to do, instead of giving all of this money in dividends to the investors, we kept a good chunk of money inside the company. And then we are actually paying cash for a new building. And this facility, now talking about commercial self-storage, is operating over 7% cap rate. So we are moving some of the money that was gained on the sale of the building to self-storage, where we are getting a better return in that sense. And we didn't need to do any refinancing on the self-storage facility. We were able to pay cash. So that's one of the benefits of having this cash, and by following on what Bruce is saying, moving money moving money fast from a low cap rate to a higher cap rate. And basically, this is exactly what we're doing. It's not showing in here, but this is what it is, right? So this is just kind of the numbers that we had on that building. And well, this is our info here. If anyone has any specific questions that we can have a few minutes, Bruce, in here to answer, we'll be pleased to answer anything.
That was an excellent presentation, really fantastic. I'm blown away, Ruben, and not surprised. Ruben is an engineer, and And, I'll just kick it off. Now, you guys think of some questions for Ruben, and then we're going to go to Matt Slobodian. So put them in the chat box. Come on, get your fingers going. Ruben, you've kind of transitioned now to real estate entrepreneur, you and Mary Lou. You run mini storage properties across Canada, and you're adding more. What has that transition been like to go from residential to commercial, and in particular mini storage?
I think Mary Lou can answer that because she loves self-storage. So I'm gonna
Yeah, the difference with multifamily and self-storage, multifamily is a good investment, but I work with the property management company, and we have some challenge always. I mean, it's almost on Mondays, I'm expecting to have, someone complains, someone do this and this. And with the COVID, mostly with 2021, we have more challenge with the people. Some people, they don't pay the rent, and the LTD was supporting that decision. And it took months to get rid of the tenant that they didn't pay the rent. It was some challenge here, mostly in Ontario. I know about the Canada. BC didn't have this kind. They have problem, but not so intense, the problems. And then buying the self-storage the first time, I wasn't convinced at the first because it was different totally. But once we took possession and we start working, I love the self-storage.
Well, I can tell you guys that Mary Lou and Ruben bought a mini storage property east of Ottawa that had 56 units, completely empty, 20 acres. Do you mind if I tell folks what you paid for it? They for 20 acres and 2 buildings with 56 storage units, they paid less than $500,000. What was the actual purchase price? $415,000. Now think about, say, Vancouver. What can you buy in the residential sector for $415,000? Not very much. In Toronto, probably not even a shed. So they got over 20 acres of commercial land and 56 units. And I went over with Ruben and Mary Lou yesterday what they can do with that. And Ruben and I, Mary Lou, think the mini storage part of that property will be worth around $3.5 to $4 million in the next few years. And then they'll still have about another 18 acres of industrial land, which will be worth millions more. So when you sell this building on Indian Road in Sarnia, and you trade it for a property like that, that's a pretty friggin' great trade. You make millions on the multi-res. And as Mary Lou said, in commercial, if your tenant doesn't pay, out they go. It's not months and months of, and Mary Lou turns out to be like this wickedly great leasing person. She's amazing. Last question. We've got 2 questions for you, and then you're up next. 2 questions. I'll go with Peter's first because it's a little bit shorter. How do you handle, Mary Lou and Ruben, all the travel that comes with you own property in Sarnia, in Wyoming, in Ontario, and all kinds of other places? How do you handle that, the travel?
Key things, and that's what I said. Remember, I mentioned the first mistake we did on the sixplex. I think the key thing is what kind of partners you have, because everyone on the ground there is your partner. But we always sustain that. People say, well, you get a good realtor, you get a good inspector. I would say, yes, you need that in the purchase. But after the purchase, they're gone. The key partner that you have is your property management. I mean, if it's one person or if it's a company, you got to work with that company or that person very closely. And I already lost count of how many trips or how many times we've been in Sarnia. And now Champlain, because when Bruce is saying now this property, the other properties in Champlain, so we've been to Ottawa a few times now. But we have a key, I mean, in Champlain, we had to develop that. We have a key partnership, I mean, in this case, a property manager is a person. This is not a company. That she's doing fantastic job. I mean, she also loves that self-storage and by the way, Bruce didn't mention, but that self-storage went from 0 to 100% occupied. And we have now about 3 or 4 people in waiting list on those units in about a year, right? So it was an abandoned property for 10 years with the buildings intact, because these are metal buildings. Nothing happened to the buildings, actually. But the key thing is the partnership. And then we do a lot of systems. We have systems in our side. We got procedures. We communicate with them almost on a not daily basis, but Marilu does it on a daily basis now with the self-storage. On the apartment buildings, it's not on a daily basis, but on a I would say weekly basis. And it had to work. I mean, we have changed. It's not all love story. We have changed in Sarnia 3 times, property management company, 3 times in 5 years. So until now, we are working with the one that we have. It's okay. It's not the greatest, but among the other ones, it's not the worst one, right? So.
Okay, so I want everybody, you know how to do the reactions. Give Ruben and Mary Lou the thumbs up or whatever, the reactions. Come on, guys, the applause. That was a fantastic presentation. Ruben and Mary Lou, would you mind putting your email addresses into the chat box? Because there were a bunch more questions. Once people got going on the questions, they really got going. And, I think Rose wants you to come back and do a presentation on the mini storage business. And there's a bunch more questions. One of the questions I think Pierce asked, Ruben, which is a perfect lead in to you, Matt. Matt, I just made you the co-host here. So you'll be able to share your screen in a second. One of the questions that Pierce raised, and I'll just read it. What are the benefits of going with CMHC? Seems like a lot of cost and a lot of effort. Well, we've got Matt Slobodian here, who is one of Canada's leading experts, does huge volume of CMHC loans. He has a wonderful presentation. And I hope you don't mind, we're going to probably run about 5 to 10 minutes overtime. I hope everybody doesn't mind, because I really want to give Matt the time he needs. Ruben, if you don't mind muting yourself. Matt, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce, for the introductions. And Ruben and Mary Lou, congrats on that successful project there. Great presentation. And just looking at the time, as Bruce has mentioned, want to make sure that we have enough to cover the presentation here. So I'm going to jump into, I'll share my screen here.
Well, it's such an important presentation, Matt. You take the time that you need to do it, because Pierce asked the question that I'm sure is in everyone's mind, including mine. I don't know enough about CMHC other than the fact, and I think you know this, Matt, that my father, Professor O.J. Firestone, when he was working for the government of Canada in post-war reconstruction, actually worked on the establishment of Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, now CMHC. So it's in my family's blood to be interested in this subject.
Fantastic. No, and again, appreciate the opportunity to join you. I think it's about 2 years now since I did my last ROI presentation, and at the time it was the CMHC Affordable Flex program. So this is going to be pretty much the new program that's taken over that. So can everybody see my screen? Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of get right into it. So do a quick elevator pitch. Some of you guys have heard this already, but as to who Kanata ICI is. So Kanata ICI, we're a national commercial mortgage brokerage. We do about $6.5 billion annually across Canada. That's conventional and CMHC financing. On the conventional side, pretty much all your food groups in terms of asset classes. So not just multi-unit residential. And within that, we are covering pretty much all of Canada. And with that, we have pretty much unlimited sources of capital, because we are a commercial mortgage brokerage. So we have about 125 lending relationships, and that is essentially pension funds, your Schedule I lenders, credit unions, all the way to private capital and mortgage investment corps. So we have that external lending brokerage process. We also have $3 billion of exclusive capital. So Kanata ICI is also a lender in this case. And again, we lend out to all asset classes in this regard. Just of kind of where we're positioned. So right now, We have offices in Vancouver, Edmonton, which is our head office, Calgary, Winnipeg, my previous hometown, Toronto, Ottawa, my new hometown, Montreal, and probably the next hit list is probably somewhere in Nova Scotia, probably within the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, we've been around for over 25 years. And we've amassed about 100 some odd employees across the company, considered the largest commercial mortgage brokerage in Canada based on that. So in that regard, we have about 40 mortgage brokers. And as I mentioned, our asset management group, the blue side, $3 billion of assets and our capital. And that's made up of 30 institutional investors, pension fund style capital, as well as private capital, but we can get extremely aggressive on high leverage solutions, long-term interest only plays, and for that acquisition or bridge or construction financing. And we are also a CMHC approved lender. So the biggest things to note is we do conventional CMHC. We have that internal capital. And then as well, we're the largest third-party originator for CMHC in Canada. So what that means is we're CMHC approved. We can go get that COI for you guys, and then we can go and do a competitive bid process towards the lending community. So advantage of doing so with that regard versus going to a lender direct. Lender direct, typically you have to sign a term sheet, pay them a fee, and then they'll go and get your COI. And you're essentially bounded by their terms pricing structure on that basis. So you're almost like a restricted agent, hockey terms. With us, you don't have to sign a term sheet, don't need to pay us a fee. We pride ourselves in the amount of business that we do. So we will essentially go get you that COI. So we'll go do that heavy lifting up front, free of charge. We'll go and get you some options in the lender community afterwards. Basically find the best market deal so we can go to every lender that you can think of that's CMHC approved. So you're an unrestricted free agent basically, and we'll get you that best deal and we'll manage that process from start to finish. This I'll skip here. It's just a process as to how we go from start to finish, but essentially we're with you, right until the loan funds. And if it's construction, we'll work with the quantity surveyor on a monthly draw basis and make sure that the draws are going smoothly. So the fun part, CMHC. So this part here is something that we're going to spend pretty much the bulk of. And for those that are familiar with CMHC, they have a bunch of insurance programs. They have a government funded arm, which we won't discuss today. We're going to talk about the MLI Select program, which just rolled out fresh last week. And essentially it's replacing its predecessor, which was the MLI Flex program, which was just strictly covering affordability. So I'm going to see if this works. Let me know if you can see my screen on the, do you see the MLI Select website?
What we see is your slide deck, but we don't see the MLI. Do you have more than one screen?
I'm going to switch it over right now to see if this works.
Screen.
Does that?
We're still seeing the slide deck. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Oh, now
Kate,
we're
you
seeing
see
your handsome face.
See me? Perfect. Kate, that works. So then we're going to go see if this website. Here we go. How about now?
Beautiful.
Perfect. Okay, so this is on CMHC's website, so it's public. You can scroll to this, and I can provide links if you don't have. But essentially, this MLI Select program is earmarked for essentially construction, purchase, and refinances. So it covers all the gambits. What CMHC is focusing on is the three pillars of the national housing strategy. So they're tackling affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility. And they're essentially providing it based on a point structure. And I'm going to bring this up here. We'll start on the construction because this might apply to some of the real estate developers here. One sec. There we go. So new construction. So as I mentioned, CMHC came out with this new program where essentially there's three pillars: affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility. Depending on where you rank with your project, you score points. So this is new to CMHC. And essentially for any developer that's looking to build a project, I would highly recommend running this program through to see where it fits. But essentially the program is this: the more you score in terms of points, and there's different tiers that you see here that you can score points, will essentially determine what type of loan you get and the benefits of the CMHC program. So if we start with affordability on this side here, they essentially define affordability as this, and let's just assume that the first tier here, 50 points you score. This assumes that you are putting in 10% of your units at 30% of the median renter income. And now you ask, like, what does that mean? So CMHC essentially is defining median renter income now. And so I'll get into that in a bit, because I'll have to share a different screen there. But essentially, as long as you keep your rents, 10% of your units that you're proposing at or below 30% of median renter income, then you'll score 50 points for the affordability portion. There is a footnote here as well that they've indicated. And so if we scroll down here, that affordability component, you have to keep in place for 10 years. That's your minimum period of time of affordability. And that 10 years, you can increase the rents, but as per provincial guidelines allows, that's it. However, if you wanted to extend that affordability for 20 years, you'll get an extra 30 points. The idea here, everyone, is to get to 100 points. You want to get in this 100-point club. And so that's what we're here for, is to help guide you through this process to get to 100 points. So I'm not suggesting, hey, do 25% of your inventory as affordable. We can look at that if that's the best solution. But there's also two other pillars here that we can also access points. So there's an energy efficiency component to it as well. So depending on where you're building, and we're in Canada, the building codes might be quite rigorous that requires you to build 20 or 25 or 40% above code, especially in BC. There's a BC energy efficiency step code now in place. But depending on where you land, you could score some points, basically 30, 50, 100 points here. So it can just be, you don't have to focus on one pillar. You can do a mixture of the three. And then there's accessibility as well. So what I would suggest with accessibility is, obviously there is costs associated with factoring in accessibility to your units. So if you're building a 50 plus rental or retirement, then inherently you're building that. So that's when we could score some points here, but I wouldn't necessarily build it into your project if you're just doing a standard rental project. So at the end of the day, what I'm just showing you here is that there's tiers. You want to get to 100 points. So what does 100 points get you? That's what I want to focus on, because when we discuss a project, this is what we're going to go in on every time. I don't think there's a benefit to do 50 or 70, in my opinion. So for 100 points, the CMHC premium. So talking, basically, what Ruben had mentioned is that, there was CMHC premiums that he had to incur in terms of that refinance for CMHC. And it would have been quite hefty, because on a refinance, if you went to 85% on a refinance, and let's just assume that you chose a 40-year amortization, your CMHC premium would have been about 5.25% of your loan amount. So quite a heavy premium to pay. And especially if you're not going to hold the property for 5 years or longer, probably not the best thing. And obviously, investment decisions change over time. But if you know going in that you're going to be holding this thing for 5 years or less, then we have lenders that'll give you multi-year interest-only facilities. So keep your cash flow low, and you have the ability to sell at any time without incurring any penalties. But in this case, with this CMHC program, they're actually giving developers the benefit of scoring higher. They're going to reduce the premiums. So typically with CMHC, it's if you go higher leverage, higher amortization, higher the premium always. This new program is the inverse. So if you get to 100 points, for the construction program, the CMHC premium is 1.25% of the loan amount. So it basically pays for itself. So it's the biggest benefit for sure. And so And so what does 100 points get you? So as I mentioned, the premium is ultra low, up to 95% of your total project cost. So, you know,
Incredible.
developers, investors that are, you know, looking to source equity capital or partners to be able to meet the equity requirement. Well, if we can get you 95% debt, do you need that JV in place? And so we've guided a lot of our clients away from that because they could now retain the project 100% and not have to look for that alternative source of equity capital. And so in terms of loan to cost, how we determine that is we'll take your land value. So let's just say you picked up, you know, the piece of dirt for, you know, cheap. You've gone through the rezoning process. You've added value in that regard. We'll take the land value, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We'll take your hard costs, applicable contingencies, any soft costs, which obviously all your third-party professionals and legal and architects, engineers, you name it, anything that's a legitimate budget item, we put into this, and then all associated financing costs. So, you know, lender fees, interest reserve to be able to pay pay throughout the project. We essentially, you know, lump it up, and then we'll go up to 95%. And as long as that loan can debt service at a minimum 1.1 times coverage, then essentially that checks the box. It shows that the project is feasible in CMHC's eyes. Now, what are we testing that debt service coverage test on? Well, because you scored 100 points, we can give you a 50-year amortization, which is new to the CMHC world. Typically, CMHC's amortizations have been capped at 40 years. They've now pushed it to 50. Now, in a rising interest rate environment and rising construction costs, the only way that some of these projects are feasible is stretching the AM. So now they've allowed for that. The government funded programs had 50 years. The government insured programs now have 50 years, which is fantastic. And it's only for this program specifically. The MLI standard refinance or purchase programs that CMHC does provide currently caps at 40 years. I imagine at some point they'll extend that to 50 at some point, but this one here is another huge benefit in addition to the premiums and the high loan to cost. Rental achievement. This part here, it's basically CMHC saying that, you know, if you do the construction, it's a 24-month period to build and stabilize. Typically, you know, CMHC will want to see that you're stabilized in order to start amortizing the loan. In this case, they've waived it. So if you're not 100% stabilized or 95% stabilized for that matter, but you have enough to be able to start servicing the debt, then you can flip the switch. CMHC is not going to handcuff you or reduce the loan accordingly. So that's another benefit there. Limited recourse. So typically for CMHC construction loans, they would require 100% guarantees during construction and 12 months stabilization. In this case now, again, because you scored 100 points, they're going to reduce your guarantee during construction, the most riskiest part of the project, which is surprising from a government body to open themselves up to risk. But in this case, they're going to limit it. They haven't defined yet how much that guarantee is going to be. I'm going to assume that it's somewhere between 40 to 60% of the loan is what's going to have to be guaranteed. And again, I should mention that this program just rolled out, 2 weeks ago. And so we don't have any case studies, I guess, to provide you. What I can say is that we're essentially going to be order takers for this program because the project, as you see here now, it's like it basically sells itself if you're doing a construction project. And so on the first day, on the Monday when it rolled out, we had analysts across the country basically ready to submit this at 12:01 a.m. on Monday. So they were up Sunday night ready to submit. We had just over 75 applications in the queue.
So Matt, can I ask on behalf of the class a couple of questions?
Sure.
Okay. Tim Reed in Alberta is asking, do soft costs, are soft costs included in the cost?
100%. Anything that you can think of that's a budgeted item, we throw in there.
Okay, thank you. So there's your answer, Tim. And then Mark asks, at what point do you get involved if I have Mark has a large multi-construction project in the pipeline, when does he reach out to you, Matt? But before you answer that, Matt, I'm going to say something that's relevant, I think, to all the sort of questions that are in your mind. I would never, ever, ever attempt to get CMHC funding without Matt's help. Matt is coming to Belleville with me. We're taking a road trip together now that he's in Ottawa. We're going to go to Belleville next month in April. Mark Turner, you can see up there on the screen, Matt, and his son Jordan, they're waving at you. Our project coordinators and project managers for a number of projects in Belleville. And you know, so to have somebody like Matt Slobodian on your team to walk you through this, to do it yourself. Now, obviously there are analysts, as Matt just said, who understand enough about this, they can do it themselves. Maybe Ruben can do it himself, but I cannot. I don't think like a mortgage broker. I actually had a mortgage brokerage license for about a week, and I realized it's way beyond me. So something I want to underline, Matt said that service, Mark, and everybody on the call and whoever watches this later, those services are free. There are a lot of scams out there. You probably get them every day or every week. Send me $50,000 US and I can get you $29 million US at 2 or 3% with 40-year amortization, blah, blah, blah. Those are our scams. You send them the $50,000, then they give you a commitment with so many clauses in it and so many hurdles to jump that you can never actually access the funds. It's just a scam. Matt's company has been around for decades. They do this for a living. So I wouldn't touch this without his help. And as you know, you don't pay anything until the funding arrives. A couple other questions we got, Matt, was is it capped by region? Will CMHC limit the amount of funding by region?
So I'll answer that one first. So with the insured program, this one here, there's no funding limitations. The government funded programs do. They have an annual bucket basically, and they spread it across Canada, and that can fill up quite quickly, especially, you know, the GVAs, the GTAs and GMAs of the world, or I guess of the country, sorry. That was really what it was earmarked for those government funded programs. But the insured program, we're just going to CMHC for the insurance. The capital is coming from the lenders across the country, and it's full. So we haven't had any limitations on capital. What I would say is that it really depends on kind of the geography and based on the vacancy in that area. So when the previous program rolled out, the CMHC Affordable Flex program, the predecessor for this guy, we were probably the most responsible company for flooding CMHC construction loans in Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary. I mean, those are kind of probably our main three centers of where we're operating, to the point where CMHC has kind of put them on the red flag list and said, guys, we need to be very selective going forward on CMHC construction loans until these projects start absorbing. And so if you go on CMHC's website, they have a portal where you can check vacancies across the country. And you'll notice, you know, like Winnipeg, for example, and I think it might have been Toronto as well, but Winnipeg for sure, was one of the few cities that actually vacancies rose this past year. And again, keeping in mind that it was a pandemic year last year. So inherently vacancies went up, but most cities actually normalized and came back down as we started figuring out what was going on with the pandemic, and everybody started moving back to their respective cities or rentals. But yeah, Winnipeg went up, and that was because we were focusing on providing construction insurance for projects, and they continued to build throughout this pandemic, but we weren't able to fill it back up. So anyways, what I'm trying to get at is CMHC doesn't discriminate across the country. So they will provide insurance programs, doesn't matter where it's located, but the deciding factor is, do they need affordable rental in that area? And that's where they're gonna look at the vacancy to see, do we need more product, or is there enough in place already?
And Matt, to answer Mark's second question, at what point should he involve you?
To be honest, you can't bring me in too early. And just like how we're having this conversation now, I can give you tidbits basically to kind of get the conversation started. If you have preliminary numbers, the CMHC program is underwritten much differently, more differently than what you would expect from an appraisal. CMHC has its own operating expense guidelines that they utilize. So I would say that if you have a preliminary budget pro forma rent roll, flip that over to me. What I can do is create it in the template that also incorporates CMHC's underwriting, send it back to you so we have a working copy, and then work off that basis. And I would say that with this program, you need to be able to apply for CMHC's insured programs, you have to go through a CMHC approved lender, which we are. And so that's part of the reason why you would want me involved. But in addition to that, like I said previously, and Bruce mentioned that, happy to help at any capacity. So, with CMHC, there's countless amount of information that you need to absorb, and happy to give you my 6 years of CMHC business over a call in terms of guidance. So yeah, bring me in whenever. Always reach out. Happy to help.
Matt, is it okay if I put your contact information in the chat box?
You betcha. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the construction, I'll just mention this last footnote here. It mentions standard rental housing. So that's just basically discussing strictly rental units. So so for rental units, CMHC will debt service residential rental at 1.1 times. For shelter models or non-residential space, so meaning commercial space, they actually test that separately. So we actually have to break out the mixed use space and debt calculate it separately. And anything that's not residential, CMHC will limit their loan to 75% of cost. So going back to this up to 95% of cost, that's a pure rental building. But if there's a commercial component to it, they reduce the commercial component to 75% of loan to cost. And so we have to break that out. So they will look at mixed use, but that mixed use space can't exceed 30% of the gross floor area or the 30% of the lending value, which again, if you have a mixed use project, we can underrate that for you and show you exactly how CMHC would approach it. So spent a fair bit on construction. Now, I do want to point out that they do have the existing properties for this. We do tackle existing properties. This part here, I would say, is attractive for projects where you might have some like mid-century product that has rents well below. There's no intention of going to do any renovations to them and lift the rents. And like I said, in terms of the affordability, I'm going to get to that in a second as to how they calculate that. But essentially, you'll see here, if it is a mid-century product, you could probably guarantee that energy efficiency is out the door. So we're probably not going to rank much in this pillar for any type of property that you have currently or acquiring. And accessibility, if it's not built in there, you're probably not investing in that space as well to score 20 to 30 points. So usually what we're seeing is existing stock that has rents that are 30% below the median renter income, and you need to have a considerable amount. So you can see here that for the current, if you're acquiring or refinancing, you need at least a minimum 40% of your units at 30% or below the median renter income. If you wanted to score max points, you need 80% of your units below that. So what does that mean? What is median renter income? So if we scroll down to the base here, you'll see these drop-down menus. And actually, I have it right now here. So the affordability criteria, they have a link right here, median renter income. I'm going to click on this. I'm not too sure if you guys are going to be able to see this. Do you see that on the screen, the Excel document that's pulling up? Perfect. Okay, so this here, CMHC is defined as median renter income. You'll see it's 2019, so they are lagging. And so this will be updated at some point in time, but for right now, they're defining median renter income based on these numbers. Now, they have kind of three sections that they've broken them down to based on provinces for median renter income, rural centers, which excludes the CMAs. So for Ontario, taking out the GTA and Ottawa. And then urban centers, which is kind of the key cities of Canada. So depending on where your project is, you basically go to that line item, take, let's just go down to selfishly Ottawa. And so Ottawa, they have a median renter income. And again, median renter income. So it's not the median household income. So what they're doing is they're taking out any statistic of a homeowner renter income, or sorry, homeowner income. They've taken that out of the picture and they're just focusing on renter income. And so for Ottawa, it's 61,400. So 30% of that divided by 12 to get your monthly rent is $1,535 a month. So if you have a project where you say, hey, Matt, we want to propose this project and we need, we want to minimize our affordable units, then I'll say, well, we need a minimum 10% of your units as affordable. They have to be below $1,535 a month. Now, which units can be affordable? Whichever ones you want. So they can be bachelors, 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds. Obviously, you'll probably want to stick to the bachelors. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, I mean, that is really incredible that they, like some of the buildings that I have studio apartments, bachelor apartments, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, what have you. And the fact that your studios could be, at least in Ottawa, 1,500, less than 1,535 or whatever the number was, that actually works quite well. I mean, I think that these programs, Matt, are really fantastic. For the older folks on the call, Matt, it would have helped if it was just a tiny bit bigger.
Okay, so let's see if this.
Thank you.
Does that work? Okay, perfect.
And just being totally selfish, we've seen Ottawa. What would Belleville be?
So Belleville, I would assume, doesn't hit the map right here. So let's go with taking out the CMAs.
Yeah,
and again, I mean, unless if you can justify with CMHC that we should incorporate, but let's go with conservative approach. So 41,500, 30% of that divided by 12, you're about 1,037 a month. Okay, and
very helpful.
Well, and like, as I mentioned, they don't discriminate. You can use that on any rental unit. So obviously, pick your less desirable units if they're the first floor, or pick the ones that are, could be checks of the boxes, because, and again, if, for Ottawa, if it's for $1,535 a month, but you're renting your bachelors out at $1,200, that's a check of the box. You've automatically qualified because you're providing a unit in your inventory that's less than the median renter income requirement. So
I'm sure everybody has carefully listened to what Matt says. Matt's very, good presenter. He's very quiet, he's very authoritative, but you got to listen to every single word. Notice when he talked about the 95% financing available, how he emphasized that means that for many of his clients, many of us, it means you don't need investors, you don't need partners, you can do it on your own. That is, for most people, you've heard me say it before, there are 2 chairs or 3 chairs or 5 chairs in heaven waiting for the first partners to get there and still like each other. So if you can do it on your own and you feel comfortable enough to do it on your own, you probably should, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And so, I mean, to be able to qualify for CMHC, and this is CMHC for any program, essentially you need to have, or at least illustrate from a guarantor's perspective, guarantees are required. You need to show a net worth. This could be personal net worth, or it could be corporate if you have a corporation, so retained earnings. So an aggregate guarantee of at least 25% of the requested loan amount. So as long as the borrowing entity or the principals can illustrate 25% of the requested loan amount, then that's a check in the box for guarantees.
Now, there's a million questions for Matt, that are showing up in the chat box, but I did put, with Matt's permission, his cell number and his email address in the chat box. Don't forget to copy it out, because we can't answer all the questions here. These classes are supposed to be 2 hours, not 10. And so Matt's very approachable. You can tell that he's very professional. He's one of the biggest funders, individuals in this area. And Matt, I'm correct in saying it's not just CMHC funding. You could do, what I would call regular funding too.
100%. Yeah. So that, and I know that we're running out of time, but yeah, I had a couple slides to kind of show you, a conventional high leverage solution.
Can you show one of those slides?
Let's do that. And again, so this program here, I mean, like I said, it sells itself, and happy to, assist on any additional questions. And we could set up calls this week if people prefer. I'm around. So I'm just going to quickly skip by and show you. Let's do this one here. This one here was a conventional high leverage construction loan, which is going to be funding in the coming months here. But essentially what our firm ended up doing is we have a client that builds extremely efficient. And so the CMHC Select program is fantastic if you have a project where your cost is close to or equivalent to the value on takeout. And obviously with rising construction costs, it's hard for that profitability factor. So if your costs equal value, then 95% loan to cost is 95% of value. You're not going to get 95% of value anywhere else. So that's where that Select program, pays dividends. In this case, for this project specific, my client, built extremely lean because he essentially self-performs, and so he's got a extremely low cost, and the value is significant. So he would prefer to go conventional high leverage. We go to CMHC for the takeout financing. He's going to be able to repatriate more capital that way.
That's
so
fantastic.
So what we did here, and you'll see kind of through the loan details, 59 units, standard multifamily build. We gave him 86% loan to cost, and with the lender, with our investor group, basically what we did is, let's prove your exit strategy, and we did it via CMHC takeout. And as Bruce mentioned, we can go to 85% of CMHC's insured value. So not necessarily appraised value, but CMHC does their own valuation. So that was our exit to the lender, and just said, hey, we want to go to maximum takeout. So they said, that's fine. If you can prove it and it looks pretty decent, then yeah, we'll go up the capital stack. So in this case, we got 86% loan to cost. Now the balance of that 14% equity, the client itself had some additional income producing properties that already had firsts on them from RBC, BMO, you name it. So we had that our same group basically took seconds behind their properties, going up to 85% of the value, secured seconds to be able to fulfill the 14%. So the client basically didn't have to put any cash in for this project, 100% financed.
Wow.
And so this interest rate is just based on the first. So we did it at 5.5% for 86% loan to cost, lender fee 1%, and full guarantees because it's a pretty high exposure. So that's just to show you a solution that we can go conventional high leverage and then deal with CMHC on the takeout if that's of interest, or if you plan to flip it, then I wouldn't suggest CMHC for that regard. The other slide here, which is another recent project. This one here is a good one. So this one, we helped a client acquire a property in Montreal, or helping acquire a property in Montreal. It's essentially, the units itself are, undervalued in terms of rent, a little bit dated. So he needs to go in there and, spend some money on in terms of lifting these rents up. And then go to CMHC for a takeout. So we assisted them with the acquisition and essentially built, renovation budget, soft cost budget, finance budget, no different than a construction loan. And so with this one here, again, we always look at the takeout. So we work backwards. We're like, once this thing's stabilized, what is the exit strategy? And so if we can show that, there's a proven exit, then we can go pretty high up the capital stack on the acquisition and construction. In this case, we were able to offer 90% loan to cost, meaning acquisition plus all associated hard and soft costs to get this thing built out. And provide an 18-month facility payable after 9. So maximum flexibility. We did that at a rate of prime plus 275, which is basically close to 5.5% today. again, lender fee at 1%. Not a lot of lenders are doing this, so our lenders charge accordingly. And again, all this is built into the budget. So so the client, we're assisting them with this, and so with this project here, we're able to give maximum flexibility and now able to underwrite via CMHC for that takeout financing in the meantime as he's going through this process. Now, the key thing to the CMHC programs is, especially in a rising interest rate environment, securing a rate or locking a rate up front is crucial, because rates are taking off on us. Basically, since March 8th, rates have gone up over 35 basis points. Wow. It's scary to think where they're going to be in a year. And so with CMHC, the process to be able to obtain assurance could take anywhere from, I'd say, 2 to 4 months to be able to go through the process, especially with this new select program that's rolled out. They're expecting potentially, 3 to 4 months turnaround times, as people like us continue to put through applications in the queue. So it takes a little bit of time to go through the CMHC process. As Ruben mentioned, there's a lot of info gathering, but we simplify that process. We essentially will give you that checklist and work with you on banging those out, so that once we have that information, you literally hand us the keys and we go to CMHC and we do the back and forth and get you the COI at that point. So we simplified that process. Once we have that piece of paper from CMHC will give us anywhere from 6 to 12 months to be able to basically put the funding in place. So whether it's construction in a first draw or an acquisition or refinance, they'll give us basically 6 to 12 months to get that in place. But the important thing is, once we have that certificate of insurance, we can actually lock rate at that point in time. So if you say, hey, Matt, I don't need the funds, we have the certificate of insurance, I don't need the funds for 6 months, that's fine. We can essentially lock rate at 6 months. So basically for that 6-month period, you can go to sleep at night knowing what you're going to pay. And so lenders such as ourselves actually charge a premium for that. And typically it's 1 basis point per week from the date that we say, okay, we're going to lock rate today, but in 6 months time we're going to need it. So let's just assume 4 basis points per week, or sorry, 1 basis point per week. So that's 4 basis points a month times 6 months, basically 24 basis points. So we're going to say, okay, well, here's the rates today. And just to give you an example, today's probably five-year fixed rate today for CMHC is hovering around 2.9%. A 10-year fixed rate today is around 3.2%. That's your current rate today. And so if you were 6 months out, then we can say, okay, well, the 3.2% is your 10-year fixed rate, plus you wanted to hedge your interest rate risk by locking in 6 months in advance. We're going to add another 24 basis points to your rate. So your 3.2 plus the 24 bips, you're 3.44% fixed. So it's locked in, you're good. And again, as I mentioned, rates went up over 35 basis points since March 8th. So we've locked you now for 6 months with 24 basis points hedge. And again, that chances are we have this conversation in 6 months, we're probably 24 basis points or more by then, especially with all these rate hikes happening with the feds. So anyways, that's pretty much my spiel. I know that we're well over, but as Bruce mentioned, he's got my contact information in there. And so every project's different. And so happy to have those conversations in person and see if I can add some value to your business.
So Matt, that was fantastic. I mean, I can think that Mark will be reaching out to Chiranjeev. You should reach out to Matt, Ruben and Mary Lou. I know you've got some projects, Denise and Stuart. I mean, I'm doing the same thing. As I said, I'm hijacking Matt, putting him in the trunk of my car. I didn't tell him that, and taking him to Belleville with me. We're really fortunate that Matt took the time, and Ruben and Mary Lou took the time to join the class. And I just can't thank you enough. Again, let's put some reactions in our, this, so that Matt knows how much we appreciate him. And of course, our earlier presenter. Next week, guys, we are going to focus, at least half of the class next week will be focused on one of the key components that you've heard from Ruben and Mary Lou, how important it is, and that's called property management. We've got a special guest next week as well, who will talk about, he is a part of a company that runs about 1,000 units. And you know, I can't tell you how many people underestimate the degree of difficulty of property management. Most property managers, as you know, hate their tenants. They hate them. And they treat them as the enemy. That is your first clue, Sherlock, that is a company you don't want to hire, right? Your tenants are your clients. They pay your bills. They pay your mortgage, so that people like Matt can help you even further on the next project, the next one, so that you don't go bankrupt. Clients are your friends, not your enemies, or at least they should be. So we're going to really focus on that, and it's a very important part of what we do. In addition to that, we're going to focus on proper leasing, both commercial and residential leasing. Again, most people think, oh, leasing's easy. You just say, okay, this is the rent sign here. It's much more complicated than that, and there are things that you can do to drive profitability and also help your tenants. So you should have all copied out of the chat box Matt's coordinates. You've got Ruben's coordinates as well. And Matt, I cannot thank you enough for everything you've done for me and for us. I'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Bruce. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everyone.
It was awesome.